Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Playbook. This week's guest is Nikki Gibson. Nikki, how you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. Glad to have you. Glad you can make it down.
Yes.
Excellent. So let's jump right into it, Nikki. What made you decide to become a realtor? Like, what kind of got the wheels churning that real estate might be a career for you?
I actually wanted to be in real estate for as long as I remember, since high school. Life happened, so it wasn't really something that I necessarily was able to get into immediately. But it was something that I would always knew in the back of my mind I wanted to get into. You know, it's just one of those things. And I got into property management, and then I started working in groceries where I was selling to independent stores in Bush, Alaska. And so things just kind of changed for me, and real estate just was in the back burner. When my husband and I moved to Florida, I had an opportunity where I was working at a company and I was in finances, and I just hated my job. Mm-hmm. I hated every day is the exact same thing, and there was I wasn't comfortable. There was nothing passionate about it. And so I just ended up quitting. I didn't have a plan B or anything. My plan B was actually just to do the real estate course. Mm-hmm. And I had every intentions of, passing it and then going and taking the state test and then being an agent immediately. But that didn't happen the way that I planned. It actually took a lot longer to pass that course test and then to pass the state test. And it was a long journey, but
you made it.
I made it. I finally did it.
That's all that matters. As long as you hit the finish line. So you touch on a lot of points that I kind of want to do a deeper dive on some things, but one thing that you say and I always tell people is pain is going to be a stronger motivating factor than pleasure. Mm-hmm. So I think the pain of your job and being just like over it and done finally got you to commit and do the things you needed to do to kind of live out your dream and what you've always been passionate about, which is real estate.
Right.
One thing, so you did bring up property management. So we always kind of see what people's background was, successful agents, how they're able to get into success sometimes at a quicker pace than other agents. And a lot of that has to do with, their skill set, communication skills, and some of their kind of past experience that they kind of can bring over to real estate. You having the property management background, obviously you already understand some of the fundamentals and principles of real estate. But let's talk about the independent stores for groceries. So was that like a business-to-business sale?
It was. So it was a big, huge corporation that had an entity. It was its own little side thing called JB Godstein. Mm-hmm. And it was an independent grocery, independence. So basically it would get orders from Safeway, mm-hmm. and we'd get them to JB Godstein, okay. And it would be for the independent grocery stores in Bush, Alaska. These stores, there's no way to get to them except for a plane, mm-hmm. right? And then once you land there, in some of the cases, you can't even get to the store unless you dog sled or four-wheel or a truck, wow. to even get any closer to the store. So it was quite an adventure. So I was part of the logistics team, and I watched the groceries go from start to finish to the consumer. Mm-hmm. And then that's when they sold it. So it wasn't Safeway groceries, it was independent because it still was our brand, but they were selling it. Mm-hmm. So it gave them their independence. And
your primary job function, besides obviously keeping it in the loop, was the logistics, getting it from Safeway, rebranded to the company, and then to the stores in Alaska by various means because of obviously the terrain there and the weather conditions.
Right. So it'd get to our warehouse in Anchorage, and how it'd get there is usually from Texas, and it would get through barged in, or it would get trucked, depending on if it was turkeys or depending on what it was, and by plane. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm going to kind of take a wild guess here. So based it on your logistical, from what I know of people who've come from logistics, there's a lot of things that can go wrong more than that can go right, right? Mm-hmm. And with that, you are almost kind of being the advisor and trying to find a solution to the store who's probably like, all right, if it's going to be late, I might have needed this yesterday. We might be out of something. You're working with them to find a solution to get the end goal of getting them their produce, a product, whatever it might be.
That's correct. Yes.
And I got to think that probably correlated and kind of transitioned over into real estate, right? Because there's a lot that can go wrong once you're under contract. So they make the purchase order. That's a buyer or seller going under contract. But the logistical part is contract to close. There's so many things that can go wrong So based on your prior endeavor, it was more of a gradual fit for you, and a lot of agents get nervous or a little shaky sometimes if something goes wrong with a transaction because they're not used to it, especially if they haven't had experience in the past trying to critical think and problem solve what could go wrong with the transaction. But with you, it probably was a more natural transition.
Right. There's always something that's going to go wrong. You just have to be good about finding the solution, and even if you can't find it immediately, you're gonna get to there because you're just gonna have to ask the right person. Eventually you're gonna get to the right person. You're gonna get the right solution. So
absolutely. And in addition to that, your communication has to be on point, and the customer service, which is a lot of real estate. So it's almost like you're kind of coming to a new career which you're more passionate about, living out your dream. But a lot of the skills you need to be a successful agent, besides obviously learning the real estate and the market and things of that nature, you acquired through these previous endeavors.
Right. And truly, and that's exactly how I feel. I feel like I didn't get into real estate immediately, and I tell this to my husband all the time. It's because there was a reason. I wasn't probably prepared for it. For one, living in Alaska, it's really hard to be in real estate. It's the big brand names, and then you have to know someone to get somewhere, that kind of thing. But that was all for a reason, and once I got here, and now that I'm here, I feel confident. This is what I want to do, and it prepared me to this moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always feel like it's not when we feel we're ready, but when we're actually ready, and until you kind of get more towards the end and you're kind of stuck in that, process, I would say, sometimes it's like you kind of are down on yourself or hard, but everything happens for a reason, and it's more beneficial that you did that prior to real estate, because if you tried real estate without acquiring that skill set, real estate might not have worked for you.
Correct.
And now that dream's over.
Yes, and I would have been, upset and wouldn't have been successful, any of that kind of stuff, and then probably would have never came back to it.
100%.
So I'm glad it happened the way it did. Now, my biggest thing that I always say is I wish I would have started yesterday. You know what I mean? It's just, but again, there was a reason I didn't start yesterday, and I didn't start doing this early on in my life. And it's because of the reasonings that, are right there.
Absolutely. So one question I always like to ask too for agents is obviously, well, let's go back to, so you had a passion for real estate. Where did you get that passion from? Like, how did you experience buying or selling a house with your family at a younger age? Was it watching a TV show? Was it friends? Like, where did it come where real estate kind of got in your mind at a younger age that's what you wanted to do?
So to be quite honest, growing up when I was younger, I'd see real estate agents and they were just so pretty, and they had just the prettiest things and the nicest cars, and I always admired that. I was like, gosh, they are really big. They're doing something amazing.
Always out to lunch, happy
yes,
hour, having fun.
And yes, exactly. Always a smile on their face, enjoyed their job, always on the go, and it was just really one of those things that I was like, now to be quite honest, my parents didn't own homes, none of that stuff, because they themselves were in property management. So I grew up in that environment where I lived in an apartment all throughout my life. Okay, so now they're done managing this apartment building, so now we're on to the next apartment building. I went through 6 different schools, growing up. So it was kind of like military, but just in this little town, And so I didn't have that as my inspiration. It was more of the people that I saw around me. And I saw that and I was just like, I don't want to be like my mom and dad where they're, kind of struggling and having to do property management. I want to make my own hours. I want to make my own money. And, but there is that fear because it's commission based, and it's like, oh, am I going to be able to do it? And then when you do it, you can do it.
Absolutely. And it's kind of like, I always say to experience peace, you kind of have to go through suffering, and it's that a lot of it's those mental obstacles and the mindset of overcoming it. But once you get it, it just brings so much, peace, I think, to the person, the fact that you made it and know you made it, rather than just being handed something to kind of go through the struggle.
Yes, I wasn't handed anything growing up. Yeah, this was all earned. I worked hard for it, and I'm teaching my kids the same thing too. But it's just one of those that you learn from it, and you grow. Absolutely,
100%. So obviously you're kind of have this mindset of real estate, right? You're seeing all these attractive women dressed to the nine, out with their luxury cars, enjoying life, smiles on the face, outside looking in, everything's going right for them. They got the perfect life, right? So you had all these probably ideas and visions of what real estate was going to look like once you got into it. I always like to ask, When you got into real estate, what's the biggest thing you did not expect?
To be quite honest, I didn't expect to find a brokerage that would give me the amount of training that I'm getting. I heard so many horror stories prior to coming in that it was like, well, you're going to have to find your own leads, or you're going to have to do this. And I was just like, okay, I'm up for the challenge. I'm going to do it. But once I came over to this brokerage, it wasn't necessarily like that. There's so much material that's given to you, and there's so much training that it's kind of, I'm glad that, I never experienced that, and I never went through those trials and tribulations, that I actually went through somewhere that was giving me the material.
Resources.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So I think that was the one thing I didn't expect, to get all of this on hand, and say, oh, look, here's the buyer's guide. Here's this is how we do it. This is how. I wasn't expecting that, but I'm so happy I got it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So like the vision you had in your head from everybody you were speaking to were at brokerages where it wasn't kind of a teamage or team-based, where it was more like just independence and everybody kind of off on their own, is, hey, you got to learn the business, you got to find all your sources, this and that. And you didn't know there were options such as 54 Realty that you could come kind of work at, and some of that stuff is provided to you.
Correct, yes.
Okay, awesome. Now, right now, obviously, there's a lot of, the market shifting, pivoting. What's one thing that you're really doing to hone in your skills or double down in now to ensure that you're going to have the continued success you're already having, and to further expand on that as well as you build your brand?
Being open-minded. So I am open-minded to all advice, to all options, to everything. And one of the things is that I want to build my brand to where, and I know last year and the year before were amazing, right? People were just like, no one had to do open houses. There was just, everyone was flooding into this market. But now it's much harder, and I'm glad I'm actually in the market when I am, because it's giving me the base of my customer service. It's giving me the base of knowing the game, knowing how real estate works. If I would have came in last year, and I'd probably be struggling right now because I wasn't probably paying attention, or I wasn't attentive to what I needed to actually be doing in the long run.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
A lot of people resting on their laurels and things of that nature just because of the nature of the business.
Right. And now I'm in a point where I'm coming in it when it's a little bit different. And I appreciate that, because it's making me work harder, and I appreciate working harder.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about that, because that's a great point that you brought up, being open-minded, because I think a lot of people in anything in life, closed-minded, not being open to other ideas, suggestions, or way to improve or get better. It just limits to a lot of people, and it's a limiting belief, I feel. With the open-minded, is it something that has always kind of come natural to you and is in all walks of life? Or is it that, hey, I'm just going to have this mindset in real estate because I'm passionate about it and I want it to work? It's
going to be both. Okay. So I'm not pessimistic. I'm very optimistic kind of a person. I think things through before I actually jump into something. My husband would tell you differently, though, because he's an analytical engineer, and he would tell you, nope, she likes, and she'll do it.
Yeah.
But I think about it before I actually do it, and sometimes it holds me back, but recently I have decided that I'm going to do it regardless. Now, if it's something against the law or something, but if it's something that's bettering my future, I'm just going to do it. And there was a saying that I read, and I wrote it down in my notebook that I use for real estate. And it was, if it's making you uncomfortable, then you're going to be successful. And I really believe in that. If I'm uncomfortable doing something, that's because it's actually going to be good in the long run. It's going to create me success. And so that's part of me being open-minded.
Absolutely. Well, that's awesome. And then as far as, I think you mentioned you do have kids, because you were talking about installing the same beliefs and stuff, that kind of principles that you grew up with, same mindset, obviously your husband. So obviously, in addition to you working on your career in real estate, expanding that, wanting to build on that, you also have obligations as wife and a mother to the children as well. What are some things, one of the things that I think most agents struggle is what I call work-life balance. What are some tools or mindset or principles, whatever you might want to call it, that you've instilled in place to help create that work-life balance where you can be there for your clients, be there for your kids, and also be there for your husband?
One of the things is that, so Sherilyn, she's one of the agents that work here, and I, yes, and I talk to her all the time.
Did you know her back in Alaska?
Yeah, well, her and her sister and I, we were good friends and stuff.
Awesome.
And so,
I didn't know that.
yeah, we all moved basically around the same time to Florida. But, one of the things that she had said that is she shuts her phone off at a certain time. And so I was like, okay, so I'm going to start doing that. So I shut my phone off at a certain time. I make sure at 9 o'clock p.m. that there's no more real estate that to be done. Now, one thing about real estate, it's not an 8-hour job throughout the day. It's not like 9 to 6.
Right.
It is... You got a phone call, you take care of your client, you do what you need to do, and then you did it, So now you can go on to the next client, or you can take your kids to the dentist appointment, or you can take them to hockey practice. And then you can still work from there too. So my work balance is really just being there for my kids, but also obviously being there for my clients, but I don't have to be there all 8 hours doing real estate. It's throughout the day.
So I'm going to sum that up by you are very militant with a schedule and working a calendar so you could fit everything in and meet everybody's needs.
I do work off of a calendar, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people, sometimes I've found the agents who don't use calendars tend to struggle because you're kind of all over the place. But when you're putting everything in the calendar, you have the free time. And also, I think it allows you to build confidence and a lot of times take control of the advisory role in a real estate, because when you have that set schedule, you're not like Johnny on the spot, right? I want to go see this house at 123 Main Street now. Okay, I'm gone.
Right.
You have obligations, whether if it's real estate or not. Be like, hey, I can't today from 1 to 3 or 3 to 5 or 5 to 7. I could squeeze you in at 4 today,
right.
Or we could do 9 a.m. tomorrow, which works better for you, type of thing.
Exactly.
And I think that shows you're busy, shows you're serious, rather than if you're always available for somebody, in the back of their mind, they're going to be like, okay, she must not be working with too many people. She has all this time on her hands. And it kind of puts, unfortunately, self-doubt in their minds.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Awesome. So last thing I like to ask is, for any new agent out there, maybe somebody's kind of is mulling getting into real estate for several years, similar to you, or maybe they're newly licensed and struggling, or maybe they have been licensed for a couple years, had some success, now they're struggling and they kind of want to get back into production. If you were to give like one tip or advice for something to give them an action plan to help, get them started or get them out of a slump, what would the one thing be? Keep going,
because if I had stopped when I thought, oh my goodness, moving here, finances, like my husband's the only sole income, and I didn't, during the time last year when I was going to the courses and I was taking the state test, and let me tell you, that state test, I took over 5 but under 10. So I'm not going to tell you how many times I took it, but that was a lot of money.
So we're in the 6 to 9.
Yeah. It was a lot of money. And, I sacrificed, my kids sacrificed. There was things that I couldn't do for them during that time because we're on one income. And I did Instacart. I was shopping people's groceries, dropping it off, just making sure that I was able to execute and be at my goal.
Any means necessary.
Any means necessary. Yes, exactly. So if you have a passion, you have to keep and stay committed to it, because it will be successful if that's your passion.
Absolutely. And so what I'm hearing is two main things: is perseverance, just always move forward, don't quit. And the second thing is any means necessary. You have to make it work. Sometimes it might be taking a step back, but if it helps you make 2 steps forward, then you got to do that, such as the Instacart thing. Hey, all right, it's putting food on the table now. It's helping us, survive on what we need to from an income perspective. However, I know that this isn't, I have the goal here. So while I'm doing this, a lot of time your mind's over here, and knowing that it's part of your process.
Right, exactly. I know what the end result's going to be, and it's going to be successful. Yeah. So let's just get through it.
Just staying true to that vision.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Well, Nikki, we greatly appreciate you for being a guest on this week's podcast. For anybody in the Tampa Bay market looking to buy or sell real estate, we're going to sell all this information on all of our social sites as well. But what's the best email address they can reach you at, and the best phone number?
Nikki at 54realty.com.
Spell it, Nikki.
Nikki.
Okay.
And my telephone number is 907-947-5040. I haven't switched to Tampa yet, and I'm not sure if I ever will switch from my 907 number. I just love it. I don't know. This is home.
Yeah, give them. You got the follow-up boss number.
Yeah, well,
so you have the 813.
Yeah.
You can give out too, so that way you have it for your.
Yeah,
list or
I
anything
can't
like
remember the number.
Right, you gotta write it down. But anyway, they can get a hold of you. We'll get that shared for you on all the sites, and we greatly appreciate everyone for tuning in to another episode of the Real Estate Playbook.